Welcome back, my lovely students, grade 4, continuing our science lessons. We will continue the second part of lesson 4 of chapter 6, how can Earth's surface change rapidly. Today's part is part 2. We will deal with earthquakes, floods, landslides, and droughts. Let me remind you first by the rapid changes on Earth's surface, which are earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruption, landslide, and also floods and drought. We will deal with each part in detail, inshallah. So I need you to pay me your attention, please, to understand each part of our today's lesson. Let me remind you first by the previous slide of the previous lesson, which is talking about Earth's moving plates, because it's very important to remember this information and terminologies as well. We studied the crust, and let me remind you again by crust. Crust is a layer of rocks in the outer surface of the Earth. Then going to mantle. Mantle is a part of the Earth between the core and the crust. We also can define mantle as the second layer of the Earth that outer crust rests on its top. The crust and the top of the mantle are divided into large pieces called plates. Plates. Don't forget this terminology, plates, because this is the axis of our lesson. So plates move all the time, and this movement causes rapid changes in the Earth's surface. Volcanoes and earthquakes occur along or near places where Earth's plates come together, like we explained in the previous lesson. Some mountains and features on the ocean floor, such as trenches and tall ridges, occur because the movement of plates. So in this part, inshallah, we will know more and more in detail how the movement of plates cause earthquakes and tsunamis depending on the earthquakes. So let's start and explore our first part of the second part here in the lesson, which is earthquakes. We will know more about earthquakes. All I need you to know this information about the earthquakes. I gather this terminology here to be obvious and to be easy for you to study as well. So starting by earthquake definition, as usual, we start by the definition of the events. By the way, I want to notify you that earthquakes, volcano, and floods and droughts and landslides, we can call them, also we can call tornadoes, hurricanes. There are many events in nature which we can call them natural disasters. So sometimes scientists can call them natural events because it takes place through the nature as well. So turning to our definition about earthquake here. Earthquake is defined as the sudden movement of plates, sudden movement of plates that cause Earth's crust to shake. So when the plates move suddenly, that cause the Earth's crust to shake. This shake leads to another definition, which is fault. The fault is related to the earthquake because this shake, when the plates move and the Earth's crust shake, it can lead to a fault. The fault is a break or crack in rocks where Earth's crust can move suddenly. So when the plates moves suddenly, it leads to crack or break in cracks where the Earth's crust can move suddenly. When the plates continue their slow movement, this puts stress on the rocks. When you stress the rocks can be cracked or break. So if the stress becomes strong enough, the rocks can break. then the plates move suddenly. That's why the earthquake takes place. Another terminology here related to the earthquake is focus. Focus here means the center or the place underground where earthquake begins. So focus here related to earthquake, we can define focus as the center or the place underground where the earthquake begins. So the earthquake starting from the focus is focus. Then the focus leads us to another definition, which is epicenter. Epicenter is the point on Earth's surface that is directly above the focus. I will show you more in detail what these terminologies mean by the next slide, inshallah. Just focus with me and pay me your attention in this slide. It will be important for you to know more about these terminologies. So most of earthquakes are small. You have to know this information. Most of earthquakes are small. We can't feel any earthquakes because most of them are small. But few earthquakes are powerful. When the earthquake is powerful, it can damage buildings and roads, bridges as well. The damage is often greatest near to the epicenter. That's all about earthquake. We will take in detail more about earthquake by the next slides, inshallah. Join me to the next one. Here, 3 figures to explain the focus and epicenter of the earthquake. As you see here, the definitions again, the point within Earth where rock under stress breaks is called focus. So the focus is here. If we take, for example, cross section for the Earth, we can find the focus here. So the point directly above the focus is epicenter. So here you can find epicenter on the surface of the Earth. So the focus is inside and the epicenter is above the focus. The fault come in this section. It's like a crack here when the 2 plates, these are 2 plates. This is the first one and this is the second one. The 2 plates move, so the fault will be here. As you see here in the figure, at your left hand side and your right hand side, it represents, what did I say? I will show you a video, explanatory video about earthquakes, to know more about earthquake in detail and to imagine and to be recognized. So watch the video carefully, then come back to continue our today's lesson.
100,000 happen worldwide every year. To understand how an earthquake happens, we need to review plate tectonics. Geologists think that the top layers of the earth, called the crust and the mantle, are broken into large pieces or plates. The places where these plates meet are called faults and are where most earthquakes occur. This is because tectonic plates move very slowly at a rate of about 1 to 2 inches per year. When one plate is pushed beneath another, or when 2 plates move alongside of one another, friction can cause them to become stuck together. When the force that moves the plates is enough to overcome the force holding them together, the plates can break apart suddenly, sending shock waves through the earth. The place where the earthquake is actually generated is often hundreds of feet below the surface, and is called the quake's focus. The point on the surface of the earth directly above the focus is called its epicenter, and usually is where the earthquake is the strongest and where most damage occurs. Seismologists, scientists who study and try to predict earthquakes, used to use the Richter scale to compare the size of earthquakes. But since 1979, the more precise moment magnitude scale has been used to measure the strength of the waves that move through the earth during an earthquake. The stronger the quake, the higher the number. The most severe earthquake on the MMS earned a 9.5. Earthquakes are changing the face of our planet one shake, rattle, and quake at a time, so engineers must create buildings able to withstand their force, while scientists become more accurate at predicting them.
For thousands of how-to and advice videos on.
So as you see in the video, the earthquake can cause rapid change to the Earth's surface, unlike weathering, erosion, and deposition like I said in the previous lesson. So continuing our lesson today, going to another slide which talk about landslides and floods, droughts as well. So these are natural events as well. We can take more information about these natural events here by starting with landslide definitions, then the explanation of landslides, floods, then its explanation as well, finally droughts and the explanations for the droughts. After we finish this slide, we will turn to the explanatory video and the end of our today's lesson. I hope that today's lesson to be understood. Let's start with the definition with landslides. Landslide is the rapid downhill movement of large amount of rock and soil. Downhill movement here means sliding of rock and soil with a large amount. How does it take place? When heavy rains of earthquakes loosen material. Loosen means release. When the heavy rains or earthquakes release material on a steep slope. Steep slope here mean it's very slopy slide. So steep slope, the materials that loosen by earthquakes and heavy rains will be loosened on a steep slope. Then the gravity pulls the loosened material downward so that the bits of rocks and soil travel slowly or sometimes travel rapidly downhill. That's why we can call it landslides. Understand? Sure you do. Turning to the definition of floods. The floods, more of you or most of you know more about floods and drought as well. You may hear about these natural events from the television, from the internet, and here we study it at our curriculum. So we continue with floods definition. The floods definition is an overflow of water that submerges land. When the level of the water is rising up, this will submerge the land. So the water will cover all the land with water. So it's look like the overflow of water. So floods can produce rapid changes as well. The fast-moving water can uproot trees, carry away big rocks, and change where rivers flow. Floods also can leave land covered with sand and mud. So you have to know that floods make rapid change for the Earth's surface. Turning to the last definition here about droughts. Droughts is an event of prolonged shortages in water supply or snowfall. There will be sometimes shortage in water in specific areas on the Earth's surface. When the water is missed or no water for a long time, this leads to drought. So drought is an event because it didn't take place all of the year. It just take place in specific time in some places, in some areas in the year. So it leads to shortages in water supply or snowfall. Droughts occur when the weather is much drier than usual. So you have to know that droughts can take place or occur when the weather is much drier than usual. Droughts produce rapid changes as well to the Earth's surface. Why? Because it destroys farmland, kills trees and other plants, and increases soil erosion as well. So this is the end of our today's lesson. I will now let you to watch this video about floods and drought carefully. So this will be the end also of lesson 4. Still we have 2 lessons to finish our curriculum of this quarter. I hope you enjoy and understand each part of our today's lesson. See you again in next parts and next sessions of science. Bye bye.
I love a sunburnt country, a land of sweeping plains, of ragged mountain ranges, of drought and flooding rains.
That's from a famous Australian poem called My Country by Dorothea McCullough. It's quoted all the time, and it's very true. Australia is a land of droughts and flooding rains. A drought occurs when there hasn't been much rain for a long time. In Australia, droughts can last for 10 or more years. Droughts are very difficult for farmers. Droughts can cause crops to die and leave animals without food and water. In cities, droughts can mean that people living in these areas experience water restrictions. These are rules on when you can water your garden or even how long you can shower. Floods happen in opposite conditions, when there is lots and lots of rain. So much that water escapes the creeks and rivers and spreads into usually dry areas. Floods can be dangerous, especially when they happen quickly. There's a common saying here in Australia, which is, if it's flooded, forget it. This is used to warn people not to drive through water on the road. Even if it doesn't look deep, the road can be washed away underneath and the water can be moving very fast. And of course, remember not to play in floodwaters. You never know what's in there. This sunburnt country is beautiful, but it always pays to be careful. In the next episode, find out more about